Hello and welcome to CCC TV, where CCGs and RPGs are a way of life. I'm Carkenna Chris. Welcome into today's video. Yesterday, Wizards made an announcement on their ban lists, their timings, and all of that. I have looked through it. However, we're going to go through it piece by piece. I'm going to give my opinions, where I think it's good, where I think it's bad, and what I hope to see going forward for Magic. Lately, with a lot of the decisions, I'm not WotC's biggest fan, but still, I think it's important to give credit where it's due, point out good spots and things that I think are going correctly, as well as pointing out bad spots and where I think they could improve. So without further ado, let's get into the announcement. Also, I will not be reading through all of this. We'll have a link in the description if you want to look at it yourself. I want to highlight important parts, go through that, and just kind of respect your time a little bit more. So they say, first, we do think we got our banned and restricted announcement timing windows wrong during this part of the year. This is the first year we've tied these announcements to play seasons, and we don't think we gave ourselves quite the right windows. That's put additional strain on a few formats, including Standard, and we know that can pull some of the fun out of playing competitively. To that end, we're going to be more aggressive next year with the number of banned and restricted announcement windows and the timing adding more. We're still fiddling with the cadence, but our aim is to have one for each major set release or close to that amount to maintain a sense of predictability and avoid disruptions during play seasons. It's not always possible to have that particular cake and eat it too, but we hear loud and clear that we don't have enough windows of opportunity. I think that's been a thing for a while, right? I played at SCG Orlando. The meta was very, very bad. There wasn't a big turnout, things like that. I'm looking at going to Baltimore, and going into Baltimore, I'm like, am I getting the same meta? Is something getting banned? Like, I get both ends of it, right? Like, I get that you don't want to ban too fast, because people making travel or whatnot are spending a lot of money, and that's ruining plans. But it's also ruining plans for people setting up for future events. I think that the vast majority of people who are playing competitively and people who are going to these events aren't necessarily locking their decks in until a day or two before. Hell, when I went to Orlando, I was still making last minute changes the day of, and I actually had to get the last of my cards Friday before the event on Saturday and hope that the vendors had everything I wanted. I also think that like leaving these problematic cards into the format stills the format out enough that it drives other people away from participating. It's good to think about players and their arrangements, but I don't think that it's so much an issue on the banning as much as the timing. If you say the next ban window isn't till November, and then we have results like we did at Orlando, and everyone's like, well, we need an emergency ban. Until you get the actual words and the actual message, nothing's changed, and everyone's just kind of in a state of panic. I think moving to like bans once per set makes a lot of sense. If there is a problem, then you know when you can address it. People know to expect when to see that be addressed. And I think it's just a really clean thing. I don't think that the problem so much is banning during RCQ season as much as it's Wizards is trying to be so hands-off with the format up until now that banning just always feels like everyone's in the dark and speculating and no one knows how to react. I think even if an RCQ season had, 2 or 3 ban windows in it, I think players would adapt accordingly if they knew when to expect and when to get the information. We're also going to slightly move up the previous announced ban and restricted announcement date from November 24th to November 10th. This keeps the same basic premise of not interfering with players who have planned their decks and travel for standard RCQ season, while still moving up the announcement and giving players more time to prepare for the World Championships should something change. It's kind of a nothing burger. I mean, moving it up 2 weeks is nice. The 10th is better than the 24th. Marginal upside. Like, I would much rather see them get rid of something now, but if they're not, I mean, I'll take 2 weeks over nothing. So I guess that's a slight positive. What we're not going to do is create a previously unannounced emergency banning window in the middle of the RCQ season, though it's worth noting that we have seen the calls for it and discussed it. Ultimately, we opted to stick more or less to what we have said we do for a few reasons. I don't think emergency bans are good. With that said, when there's issues need to be addressed. I don't think that the problem is emergency banning right now. I think the problem is this, like they said before, the scheduling is so spread out and so wide and so hands off that the only way you can address something right now is through an emergency ban. I mean, if Standard has to die for Vivi sins for 2 more months, like short term, that's horrible. It makes me reconsider what I'm doing for Baltimore, reconsider how I make content for the next 2 months when it's just play Vivi or play Mono Red. But long term, if they do what they say they'll do with, making a cadence that's more like once per set, I think we don't run into this issue, because then instead of it being an emergency band, it's a planned band. Everyone knows what to look for. And I think the communication's the biggest part, right? I'm not going to read through all of this. It's pretty much saying that, people playing in RCQs have spent money and time. And I agree. And that kind of hurts them. And that they've tried to do random bans before and it was chaotic. And it is. The cadence, like they said, the first part, that is the key. It's not that they need to ban less. It's that they need to ban more frequently, but let us know when to expect these calls. If they say, hey, even if it's once a month, and it's like, okay, the first of every month, something's potentially on the chopping block, I think people have a little more confidence in the system. We believe that we'll be taking action in November. Vivi is warping the standard format and likely needs to go. It does. We're unsure about Agatha's Soul Cauldron. I think that's probably fine, but I'm not sad to see it go either. But we also don't think the format has reached its final form, which would give us the clearest direction to set Standard up for long-term success. I disagree with the last part. I agree Vivi needs to go. They say likely because they're not making a move, but I think we all pretty much know Vivi needs to go. Soul Cauldron, I don't think is a big problem, but if you get rid of it, I'm not going to be sad. I'm not going to fight you if you're like, hey, I think Soul Cauldron needs to go. That's whatever. The format has reached its final form. Mono Red was able to beat Vivi. The issue being that Vivi was teched for mirrors, and Mono Red's playing main board hate to beat Vivi. If you're playing sideboard cards in your main board, it's not a good sign. I really think that there's not a lot to work. I think you'll see Vivi moving forward. I think you'll see Mono Red moving forward. If enough of the Vivis go away because of the Mono Red, you might see an uptick in Demir. But I mean, that's essentially your meta. I'm not going to read through all of this. Essentially, they're saying that they understand Vivi's big, that Mono Reds come in and beat it. And then they've looked on the MTG Arena ladder for win percentages of other decks. And things like Mono Green Stompy look good but have low play rates. And they think maybe that could come up. And Vivi is the deck. Mono Red is the deck that could beat it if they tack a bunch of stuff in for it. The reason these other decks have low play rates is because they're not beating those decks. I mean, it's small sample, low number of people playing. I think they're kind of overly optimistic or portraying themselves as overly optimistic on things like Mono Green Stompy taking over the meta. This part here, they're kind of going back to not wanting to surprise people and minimize bans. The problem isn't minimizing bans, though. It is in a sense of like good standard formats haven't required a lot of bans. Old standard formats didn't have fire design. The problem isn't that they have to ban cards. The problem is they are printing cards into standard that shouldn't be in standard to try to appeal to more people. And as long as you do that, like the next things will come out. Like Corey Stillcutter was a menace. Before that, Nadu was a menace. Now Vivi is a menace. And that's kind of like outside the last 5 years of Magic, that's unprecedented. Honestly, the format doesn't get better until they rein in design. Until then, you have to ban liberally. If they don't want to ban, you got to tune back the design. And then they say unless they don't want to make changes unless we have what we constitute an emergency. We call it a Felidor situation internally. I think we're there, guys. I mean, as much as people remember Felidor being problematic, I would still put like Felidor below like Combo Winter, Affinity, and Cobblade. And I think honestly, Vivi's approaching those territories. Like if Vivi's not an emergency, then you don't ever have an emergency in standard. Like I got behind some of the messaging earlier. Now we're kind of getting more into apologetics. Okay, this part like really grinds my gears. Okay, this is the part where you're going to see a little more upset CCC. But fourth and finally, while we acknowledge that high-level competitive standard is lopsided, the majority of standard play is not. The MTG arena ladder isn't nearly this distorted, and in-store play isn't nearly this distorted. Most players who play standard outside of the competitive sphere have a different experience. Now, that said, there's a balance to be struck between things are fine with most play and things are unstable with high-level competitive play that we haven't currently hit. But when we make ban decisions, we make them for the entire ecosystem. High-level play gets the headlines and clicks, but the everyday play experience is important. I disagree 1,000%. And it's not saying that like casual play is not important. Like that's not the line of reasoning. What I'm getting at is that the people who care about bans are the people who are playing competitively. 35-year-old Joe who works in construction and once every 2 months goes out and buys 3 booster packs of Magic to play on his kitchen table doesn't care about ban lists. On Arena, people adapt very quickly, and a lot of people that aren't playing Vivi still don't want to play against Vivi. The idea of using Arena or casual play to like influence your ban decisions doesn't really make sense. It's like saying, okay, we have 2 people playing unoptimized decks and having fun. We don't need to ban things for the people playing optimized deck. I think that ban lists are inherently for competitive play. Even with Commander, like Rule Zeros existed forever. If you're not playing competitive play, like it doesn't matter what's on the ban list or what's not on the ban list. Like ban lists are for competitive Magic, and I think this is a very bad statement or bad way of looking at things when you're trying to decide whether a format's healthy or not. And that kind of wraps up their statement, and that's kind of like the twofold issue. Am I happy that we're getting bans on the 10th instead of the 24th? Yes. Do I think it's a good idea for them to move, ban announcements to at least once a set? I would say maybe once a month would even be better, but once a set, probably a good standard to have. The rest of it, though, with the messaging and the massaging and the walking steps back, and it's a problem, but it's not as big of a problem as you think, or we've looked and we think that this is fine, or maybe this could work. All of that, like that's kind of what like grinds my gears with WotC. If they had just came through with this announcement, been like, hey, we don't want to mess with RCQs. Hey, we understand we need more announcements. We're going to fix that in the future. Expect a Vivi ban November 10th, and we'll do better next time. And they had just ended the conversation there. Like, I think that this is like a winning message. Unfortunately, like the thing that really drives me crazy is that like afterwards, like with this highlighted bit here, they go back to playing fuck games. So like it kind of reduces my confidence that they're actually going to do the things that they want to do or should do. And that a lot of this is just going to be marketing massaging. Expect no more Vivi November 10th, maybe no Cauldron. If you're playing in SCG Baltimore, go play Vivi or Mono Red. And if you're just playing on Arena, I hope you get minimal Vivi and Mono Red games until then. With that said, CCC out. Y'all have a nice day.